The Chicago Blackhawks named Nick Foligno their new captain while also dropping their training camp roster.
You're Locked On Blackhawks, your daily podcast on the Chicago Blackhawks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Locked On Blackhawks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Jack Bushman. If you want to check me out on X, you can do so at Jack Bushman too, but I highly recommend you go and follow my Strictly Blackhawks account at Talkin' Hockey. That way you can get all the latest Blackhawks news and updates. And real quick, got to let you know as well that today's episode is sponsored by Game Time. Go and download the Game Time app right now. And when you do, be sure to create an account and use the promo code LOCKDOWNNHL in all caps to get $20 off to the sporting events, concerts, or theater events near you. All right, good morning, everyone. Again, thank you all for joining me on another episode of Locked On Blackhawks, your one-stop shop for all things Chicago Blackhawks. Hope everyone's Wednesday is off to a fabulous start. And when I woke up on this fine Wednesday morning, I had a plan for today's episode. I was going to dive through the Blackhawks training camp roster and kind of split everyone into three specific groups. And then for segment two, was going to take a look back at all of the notable trades that Kyle Davidson has made since taking over as Blackhawks general manager in early 2021 before wrapping things up by diving into the latest updates that we have on the WGN broadcast team. I kind of had everything in a nice little plan, but then we got a little mix up this morning as the Blackhawks announced that Nick Foligno is officially the 35th captain in Blackhawks franchise history. A huge news bomb coming here this morning. Definitely a huge congratulations, first and foremost, to Nick Foligno. Very well deserved. And I had an episode come out probably, 3 weeks, a month ago or so, where I kind of dove through whether the Blackhawks were, I thought there were three options for the Blackhawks involving their captain for this season. It was either going to go to Nick Foligno, it was either going to go to Connor Bedard, or they were going to go with no captain for a second consecutive season. And when I went through that episode and kind of pieced through those three options, to me, the most likely was that it was either going to be Foligno or the Hawks were going to go with no captain once again, just because it felt like a little bit of a force on Connor Bedard. Yes, we saw greats like Sidney Crosby, Connor McDavid, and of course, Jonathan Toews here in Chicago get named captain very young and in similar situations as Bedard going into this year. But just quite honestly, it doesn't feel like Connor Bedard is ready for that role. And I really don't think there needs to be that added pressure on top of his shoulders with everything that he's already having to carry, being labeled as a generational talent, the new face of the franchise, not only here in Chicago, but kind of the new face of the NHL as they've been marketing the crap out of him since he stepped onto the NHL scene. I really thought that it would be doing him a little bit of a disservice. And quite honestly, again, I preface this in that episode. I obviously do not know what Connor Bedard is like in the locker room, and I'm sure he, is a fine leader, but it still feels like he's a little bit soft-spoken, right? He's only 19 years of age. It just feels like it would be a little bit forced on him at this point in time. So I was happy to hear that the Blackhawks, if they weren't going to go with no captain for a second consecutive year, if they were going to name someone, Nick Foligno absolutely fits the bill for a couple of different reasons. Obviously, he's a respected 17-year NHL veteran who's been there and done that. He wore the C for the Columbus Blue Jackets for 6 years from 2015 to 2021. I also talked about in the past how Foligno wore an A for the United States at the World Championships. He also wore an A for the Sudbury Wolves of the OHL way back in his junior career. So he's kind of been a leader throughout every stage of his journey. And from day one, when the Blackhawks acquired him last year from the Boston Bruins, off the ice, he took on that leadership role very seriously. And the Blackhawks really needed him to, because, yeah, there are a lot more veterans and veteran minds on this roster now, but last year the Blackhawks certainly did not have that luxury, and Nick Foligno was just kind of a breath of fresh air. The Blackhawks really needed a guy like him to also take Connor Bedard under his wing and go and give him protection out there on the ice, off of the ice. He was everything you wanted to see out of the quote-unquote de facto captain, as we've kind of labeled him before. He got to see officially here this morning. And then also his play on the ice, right? Like Nick Foligno was no slouch. And I've talked about, throughout the course of the summer, how if the Blackhawks do want to get better, they can't be having Nick Foligno at 37, 38 years of age, as he's about to turn here in October, on their top line. But he still was a lot better in that role than most other Blackhawks were last season. 37 points, 17 goals, and 20 assists, one of the better offensive seasons he's put up in, the last half decade, even closer to a full decade. So on and off the ice, Nick Foligno really embodied everything we wanted to see from a leader of the Chicago Blackhawks. And then after signing on that extension in January, he's going to be here for not only this season, of course, but next season as well. Obviously there will probably be some conversations about him at the 2026 NHL trade deadline, but that's further down the road. But once he signed that extension, he bought in and basically doubled down on this organization, and that leadership and that seriousness that he brings to the table day in and day out, it feel like it just ramped up even more. And then we saw Foligno, kind of helping out the Blackhawks in free agency, doing a little bit of recruiting, also just kind of telling guys what the situation is like here and how well the players get treated by the organization and how this team is on the up and coming. He's just really embodied everything that we want to see out of a captain, and feels like he's been here a lot longer than he has been, right? It's kind of crazy that Nick Foligno has only been here a year. And I do feel like there are probably some Blackhawks fans out there. I feel like most people, based on the reactions I've seen on social media this morning, feel like Nick Foligno absolutely deserves this job and are super happy for him. One more time, congratulations to Nick Foligno. Very, very well deserved. But I'm sure there are some people out there who are a little salty, considering Foligno has only been here for one season. And Jonathan Toews, of course, was the captain, the last one to wear the C, and he did so from 2008 to 2023, the greatest captain, in my opinion, in Chicago Blackhawks franchise history, one of the greatest captains, widely considered across the NHL during his time in the league. He's not officially retired, and kind of the legacy that is coming with wearing the C, right? And given that Nick Foligno probably is only going to be here for a couple of years, I'm sure there are some Blackhawks fans out there who are maybe rubbed the wrong way a little bit by this decision, but I still think Nick Foligno is absolutely the right call here if they were going to name someone as captain, and it fits the bill, even if it is just going to be for the next couple of years. Quite honestly, as far as my reaction to Foligno getting it over Bedard and the decision to actually name him a captain, whether he actually had the C or not, he was still going to act as that guy and still fulfill those leadership roles and those duties and kind of show Connor Bedard what it's going to be like to be a captain, as I fully expect him. I fully expect Nick Foligno to be passing the torch to Connor Bedard as the next Blackhawks captain. Fully expect Connor Bedard to be the 36th captain in Blackhawks franchise history whenever Nick Foligno's tenure here in Chicago comes to a close. I don't mind him getting it over him not getting it. I know he was going to do the same thing regardless, but I do think this shows him a little bit of respect and a little bit of gratefulness from the organization for just how he's come in here from day one, put his best foot forward, worked hard, done everything right, both on and off the ice. You want to reward a guy like that. And, he is a guy who's worn it in the past. He spoke. What was really cool, too, is when Kyle Davidson was addressing the Blackhawks team. I believe this was either last night or sometime earlier in the week. He was addressing the Blackhawks team and announced that Nick Foligno was going to be wearing the C next for this organization. Really cool to see Nick's three kids run out with his jersey wearing the C on it. Just a special little moment there. But it's just, I think, a sign of respect for everything that Nick Foligno's done and how he's come in and really been part of this Blackhawks family. And I think that's going to be a huge piece of this organization moving forward. I talked about it in training camp, coming together, playing hard as one unit. That's why this training camp is so crucial, because they really need to do that this year in order to take that next step. And with Nick Foligno at the helm, I firmly believe he is the right guy to help the Blackhawks achieve their goals this season. So for many different reasons, I think Nick Foligno is well deserving of this job, and I'm super, super happy for him. Excited to see him rocking the C on the ice, wearing the Blackhawks sweater at the United Center here this season. By the way, another little tidbit in that video that I just talked about where Kyle Davidson announced to the team that Foligno was going to be getting the C, he did mention that Connor Murphy and Seth Jones are still going to be the two men rocking the A's this season. As far as Foligno getting the captaincy over both of them, I don't think that's really a surprise, quite honestly. Seth Jones was always kind of a little bit of a sleeper, and I thought he was more likely than Connor Murphy because of his contract and because he is going to be part of the long-term Blackhawks. I thought that made a little bit more sense in his direction over Murphy and those two in particular. But Nick Foligno over them, I think, was absolutely the obvious choice, right? Even though his tenure is going to be shorter than Seth Jones's, barring some unbelievable trade. He's just the better leader. There's no doubt about it. Even though Seth has been in a leadership role for a while now and been Captain America in the past, Nick Foligno is a different breed and a special type of human that we're very lucky to have here in the Blackhawks organization. So excited to see how things are going to go under Nick Foligno's helm now as the official Blackhawks captain. One more congratulations to Nick Foligno, the 35th captain in Blackhawks franchise history. Going to take a quick break here, Blackhawks fans, but coming up in just a moment when I return, I'll dive into the Blackhawks official training camp roster. But first, I got to talk to you all about Game Time. Hockey season is right around the corner, and I cannot wait to get back to the United Center, hearing the Chicago Blackhawks fans celebrating the Chelsea Dagger, grabbing a cold beverage, and just enjoying the atmosphere of the Madhouse. And I'm sure many of you Blackhawks fans out there feel the exact same way that I do, and that's why I have to tell you all about Game Time, the fastest, cheapest, and easiest way for you to purchase tickets to all the sporting events, concerts, and theater events near you. And Game Time is personally an app that I have used for probably close to a decade now, back when I was in high school going down to the United Center to see the Blackhawks in their heyday, and I still use Game Time to this day when I want to go to a Blackhawks game with some of my buddies, or go on down to Wrigley Field to catch a Cubs game, or even when I'm traveling in another city and want to go and see a concert or a stand-up event with one of my boys. I always make sure to check out Game Time because, again, it's the fastest, cheapest, and easiest way for you to purchase your tickets. And I also love how they provide views from every seat in the venue, so you know exactly what to expect before you arrive and before you make your purchase. Plus, they have last-minute tickets, flash deals, and zone deals that make it easy to buy tickets now that hockey season is about to take over. So again, I highly recommend you all go and download the Game Time app right now. And when you create an account, be sure to use the promo code LOCKEDONNHL in all caps to get $20 off to come and see Connor Bedard down at the United Center this fall. Again, that's promo code LOCKEDONNHL in all caps when you go and download the Game Time app and create an account. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Game Time. Back here on the Locked On Blackhawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Just want to say thank you again to everyone for making Locked On Blackhawks your very first listen here to start off your day. And be sure to go and make the Locked On NHL podcast your second listen, where the season never ends, providing national expertise with a local perspective. You can easily find the link to Locked On NHL down in the description of this video, or you can also simply search on YouTube or wherever you may be listening to your podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Chicago Blackhawks officially dropped their training camp roster on Tuesday afternoon. And of course, yesterday I went through all of the biggest training camp storylines to keep an eye on, as well as why this training camp in particular is so meaningful for the Chicago Blackhawks this year and for the long term. Make sure to go and check out that episode if you haven't done so already. But one last little thing that I wasn't able to do was talk about the training camp roster because we didn't have it yet. But fortunately, the Blackhawks threw me a little bit of a bone and dropped it shortly after I posted that episode. So definitely wanted to go through everyone on the roster here today. There are a lot of names, But what I'm going to do after reading the roster through one time is I'm going to split this full training camp roster into 3 groups: the NHL group, the AHL group, and the prospect group. And, some players are obviously going to be in those certain stages based on where we know they're at this point in their careers. But there are also going to be some bubble guys in each group. I'll make sure to mention those guys and talk about who in particular I think has an opportunity to possibly earn one of the final spots available on this training camp roster. But getting into the roster itself, starting with the forward group, I'm also going to go through each player's number just as a reminder for all you Blackhawks fans out there, because there are some players who have changed numbers from last season. Obviously, there's a lot of new faces around as well. And, when there's that first day of training camp or that first preseason game and you see some of those numbers out there and you're like, 25, who the heck is that, right? Like, want to be sure that you're all caught up to date so there aren't any surprises when you go to training camp for the first time and see some of these numbers, or watch the Blackhawks on Blackhawks.com for their first preseason game of action. But Joey Anderson kicks things off with the forward group, rocking number 22 this year. New number for Joey after signing a 2-year deal here in Chicago, which made me very happy. Andreas Athanasiou still rocking 89. Brandon Baddock of the Rockford Ice Hogs rocking number 13. Our boy Connor Bedard, our baby boy, the Calder Trophy winner from last season, rocking number 98. Newcomer Tyler Bertuzzi wearing 59. Colton Dock still wearing 28. Jason Dickinson wearing 16. Ryan Donato wearing 8. Nick Foligno, the 35th captain in Blackhawks franchise history, wearing number 17. Cole Gutman wearing number 70. Taylor Hall, 71. Gavin Hayes rocking 92, Kurashev with 23, Nick Lardis, who I'm very excited to see in training camp and during the preseason, rocking number 76, Paulie Ludwinski, that Paulie Luds guy, rocking number 90, Jalen Lipin with 43, Marcel with 53, although he is hurt, Pat Maroon rocking 77, Ilya Mikheyev 95, newcomer from Vancouver, Martin Misiak going the Jaromir Jagr route, sticking with number 68, my boy Frank the Tank Nazar wearing 91, Alex Ferrand, who along with Marcel is hurt, wearing 64. Lucas Reichel has switched to number 73 after, Jeremy Roenick got inducted into the Hall of Fame finally. No official announcement on a jersey ceremony here in Chicago. Seems like that's going to come at some point, but a nice move by Reichel, showing some respect to the newly announced Hall of Famer. Ryder Rolston wearing 36. Zach Sanford back on an AHL deal wearing number 12. Samuel Savoie with his tongue out wearing number 67. You're sure to see that a lot in training camp and the preseason. Brett Seney back with Rockford wearing 62. Landon Slager wearing 84. Craig Smith, former Nashville Predator and Dallas Star, wearing number 15. AJ Spellacy, who had himself a nice weekend in St. Louis at the Rookie Showcase, wearing 79. Teuvo Teravainen back in Chicago where he belongs, wearing that lovely number 86. And then Merrick Van Acker, first-round pick this year, who will not be able to perform in training camp, unfortunately, wearing number 83, though, when we probably do expect to see him next fall. On the defensive side of things, Nolan Allen, 42, TJ Brody, newcomer, wearing 78, Louis Crevier wearing 46, Ethan Del Mastro in 38, Ty Henry, 2024 6th-round selection, rocking 85, as he did this past weekend in St. Louis. Seth Jones sticking with 4, Wyatt Kaiser sticking with 44, DJ King down in Rockford, no relation to the old DJ King that used to play with the Blues or the King family, wearing 58. Kevin Korchinski, not down in the double fives this year. He has switched to number 14. Shout out to my buddy Stevie, his favorite number. Artem Levshinov, who I do not anticipate we'll see in training camp. If we do, it's going to be for a very brief period of time. When October rolls around, he's wearing number 55. Alec Martinez wearing number 25, the joke I mentioned earlier. Connor Murphy wearing number 5. Isaac Phillips still wearing 41. Austin Strand wearing 48. And then Alex Vlasic wearing 72. And then in net for the Blackhawks in training camp, Laurent Brossoit, who is still currently hurt. Not sure if we're going to see him at all, like Artem Levshinov in training camp. He's wearing 39. Drew Commesso wearing 33. Ben Gaudreau, who had a nice performance in the win over Minnesota last Saturday, wearing 31. Peter Mrazek wearing 34. Arvid Soderblom wearing number 40. And then Mitchell Weeks rocking number 80. My boy Dean's favorite goalie. Shout out Mitchell Weeks and Dean. But splitting these up, as I said I was going to do, want to get into the NHL group, the AHL group, and the prospect group. Here's the NHL group for the Blackhawks, what I have, starting with the forward group. Joey Anderson, Andreas Athanasiou, Connor Bedard, Tyler Bertuzzi, Jason Dickinson, Ryan Donato, Nick Foligno, Taylor Hall, Philip Kurashev, Pat Maroon, Ilya Mikheyev, Lucas Reichel. I do have part of the NHL group. I really don't want to put this into the ether, but I think even if he struggles a little bit during camp, they're going to give him an opportunity on the NHL roster since he has this 1 year prove it type of deal. I do think he's going to start in the Blackhawks opening night lineup come October 8th. Craig Smith, also part of this group, as is Teuvo Teravainen. So of all of those names I just listed off, the only real questionable one to me in terms of where they're going to start the year is Lucas Reichel. But I firmly believe he's going to start in the NHL. All other of the 13 names are NHLers. They're going to be, whether they're in the lineup, I don't know for sure. There's obviously going to be some forward extras and scratches, but there's 14 names there, and I expect all 14 of them to be on the Blackhawks opening night roster come October 8th, meaning there is one singular forward spot available, so it seems. Now, obviously, injuries can come into play. That's something that I think we all kind of forget about during the summertime. Injuries are very prevalent in this physical and semi-dangerous game of hockey, so there's not always a guarantee that all 14 of these guys are going to be healthy come October 8th. However, if they do, seems like there's only one job to potentially be taken in camp. And then looking at the defensive NHL group, TJ Brody, Seth Jones, Alec Martinez, Connor Murphy, Alex Vlasic. Those five, to me, locks to make the NHL roster. So that means there's two open spots on the back end for the Blackhawks. One, though, is probably going to serve as the seventh defenseman, as I'll kind of get into here a little bit more in just a moment. I don't know if that's necessarily the best spot for a guy like Kevin Korchinski or Wyatt Kaiser, Ethan Del Mastro. I think you'd much rather have those guys playing in Rockford than being the extra man at the NHL level and playing, once every week or 2 weeks or so. And then in net for the Blackhawks, Laurent Brossoit, Peter Mrazek. Hopefully Brossoit will be healthy when opening night rolls around. Still not sure on that, but when he is, that is for sure the 1A, 1B tandem the Blackhawks are going to roll with. Then moving down to the AHL group. Up front with the forwards, we have Brandon Baddock, Colton Dock, Cole Gutman, Gavin Hayes, Paul Ludwinski, Jalen Lipin, Marcel, Frank Nazar, Ryder Rolston, Zach Sanford, Samuel Savoie, Brett Seney, and Landon Slaggert. Now, out of those forwards that I just mentioned as part of that AHL group, I think there are four guys in particular who are fighting for that last job. Colton Dock, Cole Gutman, Frank Nazar, and Landon Slaggert. I think those four are fighting for that final spot. What I will say, though, is kind of like the defenseman situation, there's no guarantee that 15-man on the roster is going to be in the lineup on October 8th or for the next stretch of games from then on out. And I feel like someone probably like Cole Gutman fits that extra forward role better than someone like a Colton Dock, Frank Nazar, or Landon Slaggert, who I believe the Blackhawks front office has higher hopes for all three of those guys in particular, and none of them have significant action at the AHL level. Colton Dock has the most of the group, but he's also been injury-plagued. So given that Cole Gutman has been there and done that at the AHL level, I know it's not the biggest sample size, but he's had two really good stints down in Rockford. I think he's probably the most likely of the group. If they're going to be keeping someone as an extra forward and they're not going to be creeping their way into lineup, I think Cole Gutman fits that mold rather well. Now, that still doesn't mean that Colton Dock, Frank Nazar, Landon Slaggert doesn't mean they can't go out and have a standout camp and earn their way into that top 12 come opening night. I'm just kind of giving you the picture here. If one of those guys goes and earns a job, one of those latter three guys that I just mentioned, I do think there is an opportunity that they wind up inside the top 12 and, someone like a Craig Smith or a Pat Maroon can fall out of the lineup, a Ryan Donato possibly in that situation as well. And it won't be the end of the world for the Blackhawks. But if that doesn't happen, if none of those three guys, Slaggert, Nazar, or Dock, wow the Blackhawks in training camp, I think Cole Gutman is a natural fit to kind of be the extra up front. On the defensive side of things in the AHL group, we have Nolan Allen, Louis Crevier, Ethan Del Mastro, Wyatt Kaiser, DJ King, Kevin Korchinski, Artem Levshinov, Isaac Phillips, and Austin Strand. And out of those defensemen that I just mentioned, I think Isaac Phillips is perfect to be the seventh defenseman for the Blackhawks because out of all the guys that I just mentioned, Phillips for sure has the most AHL experience out of all of them. He really has nothing left to prove at that level any longer. And quite honestly, I thought he should have gotten more NHL time last year. And it was a little, I'm glad he came back. I was a little bit surprised that they brought both he and Louis Crevier back. But I think he's a perfect seventh defenseman. Doesn't have to play night in and night out, but is still capable, still someone that you feel can possibly be a piece of this organization moving forward. Not a huge puzzle piece, but maybe as a sixth or seventh defenseman. I think it's time for Isaac Phillips to take on that role. But when looking at these AHL defensemen, to me, it's going to come down to Wyatt Kaiser, because I think Isaac Phillips is going to go in that seventh defenseman spot. To me, it makes too much sense. So that means, to me, it's going to be Wyatt Kaiser and Kevin Korchinski battling for that final roster spot. And that is going to be a really interesting battle in training camp. We know, obviously, Wyatt Kaiser was a standout last year to earn an opening night roster spot. Kevin Korchinski was kept on instead of going back to Seattle. I probably give the upper hand to Kaiser as he's the older of the two and does have some AHL experience. And I think the Blackhawks do want to give Korchinski some time at the AHL level this year if he doesn't have a standout training camp. But we'll see what winds up happening when the action opens up at Fifth Third Arena tomorrow. But again, that doesn't mean that Nolan Allen, Ethan Del Mastro, those two guys, I think they're clearly a step behind the others, but if they have a standout camp, they certainly are in the mix as well. Louis Crevier, if he has a standout camp, I mean, the Blackhawks could use some right-handed defensemen, so we'll see what happens. And then out of the AHL goaltenders, obviously, there's Drew Commesso, Arvid Soderblom, Ben Gaudreau, and Mitchell Weeks. I think Commesso, Soderblom, Gaudreau and Weeks are probably battling in this camp here to see who's going to be, that third goaltender potentially kept on the Ice Hogs roster, or who's going to be going back to the Indy Fuel. So a lot of position battles going on all over the place for the Blackhawks here in training camp. And then, of course, I do want to be sure to mention the prospect group. Nick Lardis, we know he's going back to Brantford. Martin Misiak is going back to Erie. Alex Ferrand going back to Sudbury. And then AJ Spellacy going back to Windsor, where he seems like he's going to be taking on a big leadership role this year. And then on the defensive side of things, the only prospect who is going to be returning to their junior team is Ty Henry of the Erie Otters as well. So there is my little preview of the Chicago Blackhawks training camp roster. Super, super excited to see these battles kick off again tomorrow. Training camp opens up down at Fifth Third Arena, 10 a.m. Central Time if you have tickets. Coming up in just a moment before I wrap up today's episode, though, I still have to get into the latest update that we have on my boy, Charlie Roumeliotis. Real quick, though, I got to talk to you all about FanDuel. And I know you all have heard about FanDuel at this point in time, right? Of course you have. But now FanDuel has something a little bit different for you. Starting now through September 22nd, which is quickly coming to a close. Make sure to take advantage of this deal while it still lasts. All FanDuel customers only have to bet $5 down, and you'll get a free 3-week trial of NFL Sunday Ticket with YouTube and YouTube TV. And then with the YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every Sunday afternoon out-of-market game. You won't just be stuck with the Bears. I'm hoping, though, Chicago, Caleb Williams is going to bounce back in a big way this week against the Colts in Indy. Plus 120 out there on the Bears right now on FanDuel. If you want to go and tail me, make sure to go and check out FanDuel. And if you haven't already created an account, be sure to go and do so. Throw $5 down, and you'll be able to get a free 3-week trial of NFL Sunday Ticket with YouTube and YouTube TV. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment. And if you're not satisfied with the product, you can cancel anytime, anywhere. So be sure to go and visit FanDuel.com right now to download America's #1 sportsbook. Real quick, just another reminder to please go and hit the like button, comment down below, and to subscribe to Locked On Blackhawks on YouTube. And also, Mailbag Monday, quickly approaching right around the corner. Please go and reach out with your Blackhawks questions down below in the comment section. You can DM me on any one of my social media accounts, or you can even email lockedonblackhawks@gmail.com. Segment 3, before today's episode comes to a close, we still don't have any official new updates on CHSN, although they did just confirm their deal with DirecTV just a couple of hours ago in Illinois, Indiana, Iowa, Wisconsin, and Michigan. I want to say maybe it's Ohio. Not sure off the top of my head. We don't have any of the latest updates. We do know, obviously, that the broadcasting home for the Blackhawks, the Bulls, and the White Sox as well is going to start on October 1st. We do know who the broadcast team is going to be for CHSN. We also know who now is going to be a part of the WGN radio broadcast team for this upcoming season. And we finally got an update on my guy and multiple time guest here on the Locked On Blackhawks podcast, Charlie Roumeliotis, as he is officially going to be replacing Joe Brand. For those of you who don't know, Joe Brand also a multiple time guest here on the Locked On Blackhawks podcast. Always super grateful and super fortunate for Joe's time and his perspective and being able to share everything that he knows and some cool stories on his journey to where he is on this podcast. Joe was officially named the radio broadcaster of the Pittsburgh Penguins, which is, I mean, dude, such a major opportunity. I'm so pumped. Love to see when good things happen to good people. And Joe Brand is absolutely a good dude. But with him taking on that opportunity, that meant that the Blackhawks, or WGN, was left without a Blackhawks pre- and post-game host. I believe Joe Brand also did intermission stuff as well. Not sure exactly if this next guy is going to be doing that same thing, but we knew Troy Weidman, Troy Weidman. Wow, that's a blunder. Troy Murray, John Weidman, both coming back to WGN. That was announced right around the end of last year's regular season. But with Joe stepping out of that role, they needed someone to fill his shoes. And who's going to be doing that is none other than Charlie Roumeliotis, baby. Super happy when listening to CHGO's podcast with Jeff Agrest last week to get some further information on what's going on with CHSN and some of the details behind it and kind of what we can expect, when we can expect it. One thing that Jay Zawoski did be sure to mention is that he was hearing that Charlie Roumeliotis was going to be okay, even though he wasn't announced as part of the Blackhawks or the CHSN Blackhawks broadcast team, which we know is Pat Boyle, Tony Granato, and Kaylee Chelios. When I didn't see Charlie Roumeliotis get announced there, I was like, I'm going to be real mad if they let Charlie go. But to see him step in as the pre- and post-game host for WGN, don't know again if he's going to be doing intermission stuff. But what was always funny, like my favorite thing, I don't know if some of you are going to appreciate this much, but one of my favorite things always, also two things here. Running into Charlie Roumeliotis at the United Center is always awesome. He's a good dude, always shows love regardless of what he's doing. Always super well dressed, by the way, as well. But one of my favorite things with Joe Brand was, you'd be at the United Center watching the game. You creep out a couple of seconds early so you can hit the bathroom before, the huge line gets there. And while the game's still going on, you hear the horn sound as you're in the bathroom, and then it switches over to the intermission on the radio, WGN, and you hear Joe Brand's voice coming through as I'm going to the bathroom. I thought that was always funny, and now I think we're going to be hearing Charlie Roumeliotis' voice in those same situations. So a huge day of congratulations. I mean, congratulations to Nick Foligno. Congratulations to Joe Brand. Congratulations to Charlie Roumeliotis. This is a big, big time get for WGN. Just a ultimate vibes guy. I mean, I don't think I've ever seen Charlie Roumeliotis without a smile on his face. The guy just always enjoys life, always enjoys what he's doing, and is super, outgoing and takes time out of his day to, just really do the little things that I think go a long way for people like me and for lots of other Blackhawks fans. So super, 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 super excited that Charlie Roumeliotis is going to be sticking around. Excited to be hearing that voice, even though he's got a face made for TV, baby. Excited to hear about this next step in his journey. And with this announcement, by the way, we also got the Blackhawks official broadcast schedule for the preseason. I referenced a couple of days ago that the Blackhawks will be streaming their first preseason game of action, which is September 25th, just 1 week away, Blackhawks fans, from preseason action. 7 p.m. Central Time at the United Center against the hated Detroit Red Wings. Game will be broadcasted at Blackhawks.com because CHSN doesn't kick in until October 1st. NBC Sports Chicago is no longer functioning, so that leaves this little weird period of time during the preseason, unfortunately, where the Blackhawks are left without a broadcast home. 2 games in particular, since we know the opener is going to be on Blackhawks.com. September 27th, Friday at Detroit, a 6 p.m. Central Time puck drop, and then the next night, Saturday, September 28th at St. Louis, another 6 p.m. Central Time puck drop will not be televised in the Chicagoland area. You can only tune into the game via WGN Radio 720. I'm sure there are going to be ways, and I'm sure the Blackhawks have tried to kind of get these games televised to the Chicagoland area. I don't know if they're going to be able to do that or if we're going to get any announcement on that. However, there are multiple ways in today's day and age with the internet to still be able to watch these games via the Red Wings or the St. Louis Blues platforms. You just got to do a little bit of digging on the internet, which is absolutely annoying and unfortunate, but just kind of the circumstances we're left here. Fortunately, it's only going to be for 2 games, though, as CHSN will officially become the Blackhawks broadcast home on October 1st when they take on the Minnesota Wild in Minnesota with a 7 p.m. Central Time puck drop. The game still will be broadcasted as well through the radio via WGN. October 4th against the Minnesota Wild at home, 7:30 p.m. Central Time, again on CHSN and WGN radio. And same with the preseason finale the next night, Saturday, October 5th, against the St. Louis Blues. That's a 7 p.m. Central Time puck drop. CHSN on the call along with WGN Radio. All right, boom. That's going to wrap up today's episode of Locked On Blackhawks. As always, thank you all again for joining me on the show. Be sure to go and follow Locked On Blackhawks for free right now, wherever you may be listening to your podcast. And most importantly, please do me a huge favor. Go and subscribe to Locked On Blackhawks on YouTube if you haven't done so already. It's free, 100%, won't cost you anything, and really, really does help me out tremendously. I'm really trying to hit 2,000 subscribers on YouTube before the Blackhawks open up their regular season in Utah, the first game ever in the history of the Utah Hockey Club. And also, if you want to check me out on X, go and follow me at Jack Bushman2. My Strictly Blackhawks account you can find at Talkin' Hockey for all the latest Blackhawks news and updates. So until tomorrow's episode, when training camp opens up, just as a reminder, episode is going to be dropping a little bit later on in the day so I can react to everything that went down of day 1 of training camp down at Fifth Third Arena. So be sure to keep that in mind. But until then, everyone, enjoy the rest of your Wednesdays, and I'll see you next time on the Locked On Blackhawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.